my life has kind of been a roller coaster of up and downs for the last 10 years. So much so that I kind of blinked and ended up here. A lot of it feels like a blur, my time in the military, the time prior, and then these last few years since I've been separated since 23. It kind of scrambles together. But in this reflection, I was reminded of Joseph, who, if you're not familiar, went through a similar, I would say, much more dramatic up and down experience than what I had. Lord willing, my brother won't sell me into slavery, but so just to set the stage here, because we're not going to cover the entire story, but Joseph was the second youngest of 12 of Jacob's children. He was the favorite by his father Jacob, so much so that Jacob even decided to knit him a really cool sweater full of colors. That robe, of course, that pretty much painted a target on Joseph's back between all of his siblings. His siblings hated him for it, hated him very much for the favoritism that he received from his father. Now, if you're following along, we're going to be in Genesis chapter 37, starting in verse 5 here. Now, Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, "Hear this dream that I have dreamed. Behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and behold, my sheath rose and stood upright. And behold, your sheaths gathered around it and bowed down to my sheath." His brothers said to him, "Are you indeed to reign over us, or are you indeed to rule over us?" So they hated him even the more for his dreams and his words. Then he dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers and said, "Behold, I have dreamed another dream. Behold, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me." But when he told it to his father and to his brothers, his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow ourselves to the ground before you?" And his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the saying in mind. You know, this is an area that I think we all can relate to Joseph in one capacity or another. In this room is full of college students. A lot of you have just recently graduated high school, and I'm sure all of you have dreams of some sort. Maybe not prophetic visions like the Lord was giving Joseph here, but we do have dreams, we do have plans, we do have aspirations, or else you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be here studying if you didn't have plans to do something with all that studying. And I was in the same boat when I graduated high school. So as I mentioned before, I grew up in a small town in Alabama, population of about 3,000. It was a very farm-heavy, agriculture-heavy town. And my entire life, because of this lifestyle, we didn't have money to pay for people to come do things for us. By no means were we broke. I never missed a meal for my entire life, but we didn't have the ability when things were broken to just have someone come and fix them for us. We had to figure all this out. So from the time that I was a small child until an adult before I left, I spent most of my life growing up turning wrenches and covered in grease. Whether that's fixing old cars, old houses, or old tractors, that's the majority of what I did. So when I got the dream, when I got the vision, when I got the plan, when I got the calling that I was going to join the Air Force, I made the solemn promise that under no circumstance would I be turning wrenches in the Air Force. I would never go home covered in grease again. That was my plan. So I looked through the catalog at the time of all the jobs that I could possibly do, and I decided on SERE instructor. That's S-E-R-E. That stands for Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape. And basically, the reason I was so drawn to this job is because it's the perfect blend of still technically being a special operations job while never actually having to go do anything dangerous. See, it was this job where they trained people in the Air Force so that pilots and other sensitive personnel that may find themselves gunned down or abandoned in a faraway location, they would come to me and I would train them on how to properly handle those situations. A dream job. I was in perfect shape. I did all the required testing beforehand. Loved it. Loved the idea of it. I was so excited. I get on a plane. I go to Lackland, Texas, and I join and I start basic training in the United States Air Force. And you remember that promise that I made. Well, God had other plans for me. So about 6 weeks into basic training, because it's a special job that I was taking, I was required to do a physical prior to going on to my tech school where they would train me in all these ways. And it was during that physical they had discovered that I had torn my ACL for the third time, automatically disqualifying me for a SERE instructor position. And I was wrecked. They pulled me into a little back room. They set me down in an office with a staff sergeant. I can still remember his face. And he said, well, son, you've already signed your contract. That you can't get out of, but you can't be a SEER instructor anymore, so we're going to have to find something for you to do. Fingers crossed, my head down. Please no maintenance, please no maintenance, please no maintenance. You're going to be a crew chief on the KC-10s at Travis Air Force Base, California. Sounds pretty cool, right? Would anyone like to guess what a crew chief does? That's exactly right. Going home covered in grease and turning wrenches all day. I was an aircraft mechanic. I went from fixing tractors to fixing airplanes. Couldn't escape it. Poor Joseph, he had a similar path, as we see. You see, one day, Jacob sent Joseph out to his brothers to seek him out and to speak with him. And his brothers in the distance, when Joseph finally found him, they noticed him coming, but they still hated him. Their hearts were full of resentment and full of hate towards Joseph because of his favoritism, that they actually all got together and plotted to kill him. Crazy, right? Can you imagine? Your only siblings, or your entire family. This is not like it's onesie twosies. There were 10, 11 of them plotting to kill him. But in a moment of clarity, they decided that rather than getting the blood on our hands, how about we sell him into slavery and just let the blood be on their hands? So that's what they did. A group of Midianite traders came by and they sold him to him. And as I'm sure you all can guess, that was probably pretty shocking for Joseph. And that's how, and then after he was sold to those traders, they then moved him into Egypt and sold them to a house in Egypt under the name of Potiphar. And see, Potiphar was an officer of Pharaoh. He was a man of esteem and a man of recognition in Egypt. So when Joseph was sold to this man, and because Joseph, being favored or blessed by God, everything that he touched, everything that he did, and was through his gift of divination, through the Spirit and through the Lord, everything that he touched and did was successful. And Potiphar noticed this quickly. So Potiphar moved him up in the ranks very quickly, and gave him possession or use of or authority over everything in his house except obviously his wife, because that was not condoned. And you would think that the story ends here, that a man, Joseph, being blessed by the Lord, finds his way into a favorable, albeit slavery, but favorable position in the house of Potiphar. But it didn't take long before the wife of Potiphar, through the deception and lies and the lust of her eyes, started making advancements towards Joseph. Joseph was a handsome man in both appearance and stature, so it didn't take long for her to notice that. And time after time again, through obedience to the Lord, Joseph denied Potiphar's wife over and over and over again. Through his obedience to the Lord, denied that temptation. Until one day, Potiphar's wife got a hold of him by his garments, and he ran out, screaming and crying and panicking, as I'm sure we all would. But that was the first step to the plan that she had devised to imprison Joseph. You see, because when Joseph ran out, she then went to Potiphar and told him lies and false accusations about Joseph lying with her. Potiphar, obviously enraged and trusting his wife, he throws him in prison. So just a quick recap of the events that have led up to this point, and I'm going to do this several times, so bear with me. It'll all make sense in the end. We got to connect the dots. Joseph, favored by his father, blessed by God, hated by all of his siblings. Siblings plotted to kill him, ends up in slavery, ends up in Egypt, ends up at Potiphar's house, works his way up the ranks at Potiphar's house, and now is in prison for a false accusation by Potiphar's own wife. Crazy. That's crazy. Talk about a roller coaster. However, during his time in prison, there was two fellow prisoners that were in jail with him on behalf of Pharaoh. Pharaoh's chief baker and his chief cupbearer. And it was during this time in prison that both the baker and the cupbearer were given dreams. They were given visions. And no one was there. They were down. No one was there to interpret these dreams, but Joseph was. So Joseph interpreted for them. The baker, he interpreted that the cupbearer, he interpreted that in 3 days' time that he'd be restored to his former glory under Pharaoh. And then for the cupbearer, he interpreted that, for the baker, he interpreted that in 3 days' time he would be hung for his transgressions. The only promise that he asked the cupbearer to do after giving this interpretation is when he was reformed or returned to his former glory under Pharaoh, that he would not forget Joseph in the prison. Any guesses about what happened? He forgot Joseph in the prison. He never mentioned it. 2 years later, Pharaoh now receiving visions. Pharaoh had 2 dreams. They were really one, but it was 2 separate dreams. And I'm over elaborating for those who haven't read the story, but the story goes, or the dreams go, that the first dream was that 7 cows emerged from the Nile, very healthy, very plump, and then 7 followed those and emerged and devoured the first. And the second set of 7 were very sickly, very ugly. And then in the second dream, which is really just connected to the first dream, we see that it was 7 full heads of grain on one stalk. Beautiful full heads of grain, followed by 7 desolate, broken, diseased heads of grain. Joseph interpreted these dreams as meaning that in 7 years, for the next 7 years, it's going to be 7 years of abundance and prosperity all across the land, all across Egypt. And following these 7 abundant years, we'll get 7 years of famine and desolation across all the lands. And now skipping ahead, Genesis 41, 37 through 40. This was the response to after Joseph interpreted these dreams. He gave a proposal to Pharaoh about how to deal with it, and that was to store up the grain, store up the provisions, so that they may survive the 7 years following. And as we see here in the scripture, this proposal pleased Pharaoh and all of his servants. And Pharaoh said to his servants, "Can we find a man like this in whom is the Spirit of God?" Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has shown you all of this, there is none so discerning and wise as you are. You shall be over my house, and all of my people shall order themselves as you command. Only as regard to the throne will I be greater than you." So once again, the theme of tonight's message is about the roller coaster. Reflecting a little bit about Joseph's life, it's been a tumultuous turmoil of up and down his entire life, between being hated, attempting to on his life, to slavery, to false accusations, and now he is risen once again. The Lord has blessed him once again in Egypt. You talk about a rags to riches story in my notes here. From a slave to the second most powerful man in all of Egypt. And if you stop reading here, you'd be left with a story about a man who, even though life was a roller coaster full of up and downs, that the Lord blessed him and take care of him. And that preaches, that's good, that's great. We could all leave here today nourished with something, right? That no matter what happens in this roller coaster of life, that the Lord's blessing us, and He's looking after us. However, but when we finish the story, I think there's a much deeper and beautiful lesson about life that we can find. You see, because during this time of famine, Joseph's original brothers, his family back at home, they were also suffering. They also dwelled within the land. They also didn't have provision. So they themselves had to go up to Egypt in order to survive. They had to go trade and sell in order for provisions to live. And I think that the way Joseph handles this could teach us a lot about the way we need, or the perspective that we need to have in our own lives. Because you see, after some time of Joseph's brothers coming up to Egypt, at first they didn't recognize him. They do a back and forth for a while. They didn't recognize Joseph. And Joseph, he devised some tests for them. And I'm not going to elaborate about all the details of those tests, but he devised some tests for them. And after some time, the tests were to see if they had changed at all, if they were repentant at all, or if they were still stuck in their ways. And after some time, he felt that it was appropriate to reveal themselves to him. He did. And then shortly after that, his father Jacob dies. But before he dies, he instructs his brothers to ask Joseph for forgiveness on his behalf. And here he says something that I think is such a wonderful perspective that we should all have. This is picking now at the end of the book, Genesis 50, 18 through 21. Like I said, this is following Jacob's death and the brothers asking for forgiveness. So Joseph wept when they spoke to him. His brothers also came and fell down before him and said, "Behold, we are your servants." But Joseph said to them, "Do not fear, for am I in place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear. I will provide for you and your little ones." Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. So after all of that, all of the evil and transgressions that his brothers have directly caused in Joseph's life that he didn't ask for. He didn't ask for those dreams. He didn't ask to be the favorite of his father. Those things were placed upon him. And after all of that, his perspective, his view, am I in place of God? Am I better than God? God has done these things for the greater good. He has ordained these things and had put me in this position for the greater good so that lives may be saved. Because you see, the point behind all of this is we've got to connect the dots to see how God worked in Joseph's life. You see, once again, blessed by his father, blessed by God, hated by his brothers, plotting to kill, ended up in slavery, ended up in Potiphar's house, rose to a high-ranking level of Potiphar's house, back into prison, blessings from God, second highest command in all of Egypt. Talk about a roller coaster. I know many of you haven't had very much life experience yet just because, we're still all pretty young. But can you imagine? Can you imagine the will that Joseph had to be fighting? His own will to be obedient to the Lord. At any point, I feel like many of us, I would be the first to raise my hand. I probably would have threw my hands up. I said, "Lord, what is this? I didn't ask for any of this. These things keep happening to me. I didn't ask for this. I was obedient to you. I'm following you. You call me into this place. You call me into that place. I walk in. And yet it just feels like you punish me." And that was a similar thing that I did. You see, as I mentioned before, I vowed I would never turn a wrench again. That I would work out my situation to keep me out of that for the rest of my life. I followed in obedience the calling of the Lord that had placed on me to join the Air Force, and I joined. I didn't hesitate. I stepped up. From the moment that he called, I joined. I get there, and within 6 weeks, it feels like the table was flipped, and the script was flipped, and the book was thrown. But it doesn't end there for me, my own personal story. Because you see, after I got placed at Travis Air Force Base as be a mechanic on airplanes, it didn't end there. I had another knee surgery. During a PT test about a year after the last one, I tore my right ACL again. That's 4 knee surgeries now. But as we start to look backwards, and hindsight's 20/20, I get that. But as we start to look backwards and connect the dots, things start to make sense, especially for me in my life. Because you see, when I joined in 2020, it wasn't my plan to work on airplanes. It wasn't my plan to be in California. If I'd had it my way, I was going to be a SEER instructor in Spokane, Washington. That was my plan. That was my will. That's what I wanted to get done. But the Lord had other plans. So through all these various events, he planted me in Travis Air Force Base, California. In hindsight 2020, he did so that I could meet my wife, Madison. I couldn't stay in Alabama. I couldn't go to Washington because my wife didn't live in either of those places. I had to be at Travis Air Force Base, California because Madison's from Roseville, California. And there was no other way for our circles to cross. But the story doesn't end there for me. A couple years after meeting Madison, around 2020, 2021 time, I fall into a season of crippling depression. Crippling. So much so it nearly took my life. And I'm fully convinced that without Madison being there, I would have. So as we connect the dots, I couldn't stay in Alabama. I couldn't go to Spokane because I had to meet Maddie. I had to meet Maddie because God knew that a season of horrendous depression was in my path. And I needed someone there to get me through it, someone physical. I'm 2,000 miles away from everyone I've ever known or loved. So I needed someone. So he put me on her path. And now as we continue to progress forward, it was through that depression and through the help of my wife, Madison, that God humbled me deeply. You see, over the course of time, I'd strayed bad. I was living a life that I think anyone in this room could argue you wouldn't know that I was a Christian. But it was through all of these events that the Lord humbled me and brought me back into obedience for Him. And called me into the ministry. And it was after that, through a long story and a long chain of events, that I ended up here at Jessup. And then through the wonderful people at the VRC and the veterans here on campus, I've been afforded this opportunity to get up here and speak to all of you today, so that hopefully, Lord willing, something I says might stick. So as we look back in hindsight 2020, and we got to connect the dots to see how the Lord has worked in our lives. I couldn't be in Alabama. I couldn't be in Spokane, Washington, because I needed to be in Vacaville, California, so that I could meet my wife, Madison. I had to meet my wife, Madison, because God knew that in a few short years, I'd fall into a season of crippling depression that would almost take my life, and it would have had she not been around. And then following that, through the humility and just absolute gut-wrenching breaking of my soul, the Lord brings me back to Him and in fellowship and in union with Him. And that then propels me to launch my application here at Jessup to go into the ministry and meet all these wonderful people to get here today. So what's the takeaway from all of this? You know, as all of you sit here today, you all have plans, you all have dreams. Nursing students, engineers, the pilots that are in the aerospace department here, the math majors, the science majors, the liberal arts. You all have plans. You all have aspirations and ideals and dreams that you want to do with these degrees once you finish college. But I think it's better that if we stop. And most of us pray this every time. I even said it in my opening prayer, Lord, let your will be done. We need to keep that in obedience at the forefront of our mind when we're thinking about these plans, these dreams, and these aspirations, rather than scheming up what you can do or what you can be or how wonderful or successful you can be in this world. Let's keep God's will at the forefront of our mind. And just sit in humility and let Him call you to where you need to be. And if you're lucky, like me, you'll be on a roller coaster of ups and downs, but in the end it ends with wonderful, wonderful union with the Lord. So, when you're going through these seasons of what feels like divine punishment from the Lord, just remember that it could just be Him moving you to a better place. Like Joseph to Egypt and me to where I am now. It was all worth it. Lord willing, it'll continue to do it in my life. So trust His plans. Romans 8:28, for we know that those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to His purpose. Matthew 6:26, look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not more of value than they? And lastly, Psalms 46:10, be still and know that I am God. That's my challenge for each and everyone in here, is just be still and know that He's God. For everyone here, that looks differently. We all have got our problems. We've all got our lives. We've all got a laundry list of things going on. So when you go home tonight and you lay down or you get on your knee or however you pray before you sleep, and you ask the Lord, Lord, let your will be done, not mine, I want you to mean it this time. I want you to truly mean it in your heart. Lord, remove me and more of you. Lord, minimize me and glorify you. Lord, I've got dreams, I've got aspirations, but if that's not your plan, then take them from me. Because it'd be better for it to be removed completely from your life than for you to go down a path that God hadn't designed for you. Thank you. That's my time.